Sad news to hear that one of my favorite drummers passed. Neil Peart from the legendary band Rush. Man, Neil definitely was a game changer. Rush definitely was like a hard rock, heavy metal band when they started. And and even when Neil joined the band, they still had that style, but they elevated that style to the point where they I feel most hard rock heavy metal bands, especially in the 70s, they they didn't go eclectic as Rush did and still retain sort of that kind of style. They were known as also as a progressive rock band. A lot of 70s music was definitely progressive, but I mean, like, in a sense of, bands like Yes or Genesis or King Crimson. Definitely, like, Rush had that element as well. They incorporated, their hard rock, heavy metal, progressive rock, and even I'll say progressive metal style for that time. But the thing also that I admire about them is that in the 80s, they were definitely welcoming influences like bands like the Police and Talking Heads, the whole sort of new wave thing. You listen to an album like Permanent Waves, you'll hear that. My favorite era of Rush, sorry, I meant to actually do that before. My favorite era of Rush is from 1974 to 1981, from like the beginnings of that band with John Rutsey to basically like Moving Pictures. And Neil definitely, that band, it's like they went through, they how could I say this? Neil Peart's drumming brought them through different phases. And he elevated that band in a sense of not just being a regular hard rock heavy metal band. His drumming was welcoming of so many different styles. You go from 2112, which definitely was an epic, musically. And even like the last song on, was it Caress of Steel? Was it that one? Oh man. One of the songs led up to that. Just kind of like the progressive, when they went progressive big time was on 2112, in my opinion. Even though they had one song on the album before that kind of like let you see what was going to happen on the next album. But shoot. I could only say this. Neil and Rush, the way that they like just when they added things to their style, they didn't just take it and add it. They added and it made it another part. Like, it made it like, how could I say this? They absorbed the style to the point where they used it and it was a part of their style, and they innovated so many people with whatever they did. It was like, basically, it was just another growth in the band. And Neil, as I said before, his style of drumming basically like propelled the band to do that. Not to take away from their former drummer, John Rutsey, I think was his name. But definitely Neil was more, informed, eclectic wise with his style. The fact that Neil later on, in Rush's career, I know he took a sabbatical for a bit, but he even deconstructed his style to learn more of a jazz way of playing, more traditional jazz way of playing. And he was one to do that just to have like Rush go into a totally different direction, even though they kept the same style. He's definitely appreciated, and Rush's music is just, man, I don't care what era you're into, they've always like even that Permanent Waves era I was just talking about. Most heavy bands back then, and like I could count one other prog rock band that did that, would not embrace punk or anything derivative of punk, you know. Rush did. You know, you listen to freaking Permanent Waves, you'll hear punk influences or new wave and even reggae influences. You know, like you could tell that they were listening to a lot of the bands that were coming out at that time, and they were really inspired by them, but they took what they did and added, you know, to their style. And even before that, they had, you know, you listen to I can never say that title, Lo Strangiato, on their Hemispheres album. And dude, that jazz fusion style, you know, like just, man, they always definitely like kept an experimental edge to them no matter what era. I don't particularly care for the keyboard stuff after Moving Pictures, even though Signals, I like the single on that album, but I don't particularly care for the whole album. But whether I care or not, they still did the same thing, and Neil's drumming was definitely a part of that, you know. It's like they were so clever with what they did. Even when they were doing simple stuff, it was still clever. Neil's drumming is so lyrical and diverse and just, you know, there's another word that I want to speak that is on my mind. It's hard to describe this. That's why I keep pausing, you guys. I keep pausing to describe Neil's drumming. How could you describe something that was so progressive to the point where it wasn't just a genre, it was also a concept? You know, him also being a writer of many of the songs too. I didn't particularly care for the Ayn Rand thing, you know, on one of their concepts or whatnot, but, you know, him writing those songs definitely, I think, added even to his playing, because, you know, his playing was very melodic and lyrical, you know, when you think of it. And man, great drummer, man, like just an amazing drummer, you know, like just, you could be heavy, you could be progressive, and you could freaking play a one drop and do some kind of ska type thing, and it will be your own thing, and people would never really know unless they really listened to it. Neil did a lot of that, man. He did a lot of stuff like that, just what he incorporated into his style, you know, and just, man, definitely he is going to be missed. My condolences to Geddy, Alex, and Neil's family, and hey, rest in peace, Neil Peart, memory eternal. Hey, if this wasn't too straight out, I'm sorry. I actually redid it and probably shouldn't have did it from my first video. But hey, I'm leaving this. I'd like to know your comments. And this is just basically a condolence and a tribute to Neil Peart. Peace. Oh, my favorite Rush songs, by the way, and especially because of Neil's drumming and Geddy's bass playing. I'm a bass player. All of them, Alex, like I like all the instruments. I'm like, man, I love Cygnus X1. That's one of my favorites. Natural Science, and of course 2112, and the classic YYZ, especially when him and Geddy were trading fours or whatever time signatures that were in with the solos. Rest in peace, Neil Peart.